I want to welcome you all to Hawthorn University's Holistic Health webinar series. I'm Paula Bartholomew. I'm the Director of Online Events here at Hawthorn, and I'm pleased to be here together to bring you this mighty fine presentation, because today we are going to welcome back Georgette Schwartz for part 2 of Interpreting Blood Chemistry Lab Values, Why Functional Ranges Matter. In this webinar, we're going to focus on the case studies and the supportive protocols as we continue to discuss blood chemistry lab tests. So we'll proceed through the case studies, and Georgette will review specific markers from the lab tests so we understand why and when a test is ordered, and then identifying certain patterns and how to interpret the results and provide the supportive guidelines that come with the protocols. And certainly we'll have question and answer time, and we'll do that at the end of the presentation. But don't, if you have a question anywhere along the webinar, please just type them into the question panel, and you'll be in queue, and I'll present them to Georgette when we get to Q&A. Let me tell you a little bit about Georgette. She's been a nutrition and fitness educator and specialist focusing on complete mental and physical well-being for over 20 years. She currently serves as the Director of Nutrition at Integrative Acupuncture, and Georgette earned her Master's of Science in Holistic Nutrition degree from Hawthorn University. She's board certified in holistic nutrition. She's a licensed fitness trainer and is certified as a metabolic balance coach, a healthcare practitioner in Metagenics first-line therapy. She's a GAPS practitioner, a gluten practitioner, and a Walls warrior. And Georgette has numerous professional associations, including the International and American Association of Clinical Nutritionists, the National Association of Nutrition Professionals, and she's an active member of the Institute for Functional Medicine. And to that I bow and say bravo, Georgette, and welcome you here.
Thank you, Paula. I don't know if I deserve bows, but it's been quite a journey. So hi, everybody. Welcome. And I don't know how many of you were on the first webinar, but we basically just went over values, a little bit of side talk. But so what I wanted to do tonight was go over with you just what we do in my office and how we present lab work to a patient once results have been received either from their doctor, or we do have the ability to run lab work in our office. So we use a functional nutrition software program, and we put the lab values from the lab, Quest or LabCorp or whomever, into this software program, and we get this printout. And I'm actually going to switch to the live document right now so that you can see it a little bit. Well, I was going to switch to the live document, but that didn't work so well. Where'd it go? There we go. So you can see it a little bit better. And as you can see, it's got the lab value, the client's result, the results column. If it's red, it is functionally and laboratory high or low. And if it's red, the doctor's going to mention it most likely to the patient. If it's yellow, then the doctor is most likely not saying anything. The next column over is the functional range, and the last column is laboratory ranges. As you can see on many of the values, the functional ranges are narrower. This is considered optimal range, i.e. keeping people a little bit healthier than the laboratory range, because again, laboratory ranges are based on 99% of the population, and unfortunately we have a very sick population. If it's yellow, it will be a high or low functional abnormality. And what I like about this is it gives us an opportunity to say, hey, something is going on here with whatever the process may be, and maybe we can actually do something about it before it becomes a disease or a very serious dysfunction in the body. So I'm actually going to scroll down all the way to the last page on this. This gentleman came to me about 3 weeks ago and brought me some of his lab work from the doctor. And doctor told him he's diabetic. He didn't believe that he was diabetic. And as you can see, his hemoglobin A1C is not only functionally high, but laboratory high. His triglycerides are through the roof. His thyroid, interestingly enough, I came to find out during the appointment that this gentleman had had his thyroid radiated probably 30 years ago. So basically he's a medication patient, thyroid medication patient. And his HDL is low, his cholesterol HDL ratio is high, his very low density lipoprotein is high, and about the only thing that isn't messed up is his PSA, which is a good thing. So we're going to get to his, what I did with him was I put him on a low carb, time restricted eating protocol, and we're going to go over that in a little bit. But he wanted to have his lab work redone. He wasn't really sold on this whole nutrition supplement world. His wife sort of convinced him to come in, and so he's like, well, do my blood work. Let's see what 2 weeks of clean eating and supplementation has done. And his glucose, which wasn't shown on that first slide, for some reason it was missing from the lab value, was 113. So in 2 weeks, his glucose dropped to 103. His A1C went from 10.5 to 9.3. And if you know anything about hemoglobin A1C, it's usually a 3-month snapshot of what blood sugar is doing, because the hemoglobin has to have time basically to become glycated. In other words, have glucose attached to the hemoglobin. And so I would say we made a really nice step in the right direction in just 2 weeks. He's got a few other things going on, and we don't necessarily need to go deep into this patient and what I'm going to do with him right now, but I wanted you to see what a sample lab report looks like. And then what I do is I review everybody's labs and I make my little notes, because what I'll start to do is look for patterns. And what you can see in this particular patient client, forgive me, I say patient a lot because I'm in a medical office, is he's definitely got a problem with deficient hydrochloric acid in his stomach. His BUN is elevated, his calcium is low, his CO2 is high, his protein is low. But as I look further down, then I start to see his liver enzymes are completely off, AST and ALT, and low protein back up at the top is a dot we're going to connect, because that also speaks to liver stagnation or congestion or dysfunction. I do know, because I've met with this gentleman, that he drinks every single night of his life. He's not an alcoholic, but he does have 1 to 2 drinks every night. And don't care who you are, but every time you drink, you damage liver cells and you slow your metabolism down for at least 24 hours. So he's clearly got a problem. There's some dehydration markers. His potassium is high, his BUN is high. His serum iron is low, which can be an iron deficiency, but it can also be a liver problem, liver congestion problem, and a low stomach acid problem. Because remember, if you can't break down the food, the protein component of food that you're eating, you're not then doing a very good job digesting, assimilating, and absorbing the nutrients from the food. Ferritin is high, transferrin is low, and those are actually lab highs and lows. So the ferritin being high can be inflammation. liver toxicity or liver congestion, and then I put over in that other little column oxidative stress. To me, oxidative stress is sort of a catch-all phrase for lack of antioxidants in the diet, because what's an oxidative stress? Too many free radicals, not enough antioxidants. Red blood cells high, hemoglobin high, clear signs of dehydration. The gentleman is a very busy realtor, and he said it's impossible for him to drink a lot of water because he's out on the road all day showing homes, and where's he going to go to the bathroom? Meantime, his health is suffering because of it. And then the second page of his current or most recent lab work is his monocytes were elevated, which is indicative of liver congestion. His eosinophils are high, and this can be intestinal parasites or food and environmental sensitivities and allergies. Triglycerides, we had a huge success just in 2 weeks of lowering triglycerides from 231 down to 148. Usually elevated triglycerides are a classic indication of metabolic syndrome, liver congestion, or a high carbohydrate intake diet. LDL, directly related to liver congestion and alcohol intake. And then, of course, we'll get into this later, but as LDL goes up, generally HDL goes down. So we can see here his HDL is low, functionally low, mind you, but low. And then I need him, obviously, to go to his endocrinologist and have them look at his thyroid medication because his TSH is running way too high. And so that's what the lab panel looks like once we get it back and put it in our computer software program. This is his wife, interestingly enough, and I wanted you to see another one. And my notes, looks like they both are in need of hydrochloric acid. Her calcium is low, could just mean a need for calcium. She's got some dehydration markers, some adrenal markers, being the sodium high and the CO2 high. Her ALT enzyme is really high. It's concerning to me, so we will be addressing that at her first appointment. She and I have not had our appointment yet. She had her blood work done first, which I often will do because I like to see, not that that's what I'm specifically focusing on, but it gives us a really nice starting point. They both were agreeable to doing the lab work that we do so that I get some markers that general practitioners don't often run. And the woman is extremely overweight, and one of the things that we'll see here is her insulin level is 16. And while that is in normal range, she's really good at storing fat. So, and that's something that I will have to address with her. She also has some triglyceride problems, a fatty liver problem, and she's showing, interestingly enough, everything that we would think would be iron anemia. There's also some indication that red blood cells, hemoglobin, and hematocrit being high are just simply markers of dehydration. Obviously, if the blood doesn't have enough water to flow, it's going to create a problem. But also, she needs some B12, folate, some B6, and some vitamin C. So you can see how I make my notes on the lab panels for the patients. Her homocysteine is elevated, and that can be a MTHFR gene mutation. It can be an indicative of inflammation, or she could be taking the wrong forms of B vitamins. They need to be in methylated form because clearly her body isn't using what she's taking, if she is taking it. But it all goes back to digestive tract because B12, intrinsic factor, etc., all made in the small intestines where we do digestion, assimilation, and absorption.
Georgette,
Okay. Yes.
how old are these two?
He is 67 and she is, I believe, 65.
Okay, and on that last report, it said that it was a lab error for the VLDL cholesterol.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to me. I need to check with that because with an LDL as high as it is and triglycerides as high as it is, I'm interested as to why the VLDL is so incredibly low.
Mhm. Good. Good question there.
Yeah, because it's really curious to me. Usually with elevated cholesterol, with elevated lipids, you'll see an elevated VLDL, especially with all the inflammation this woman has in her body. I mean, if it's an accurate measurement, then she's very lucky. She doesn't have, really bad small dense cholesterol and hopefully not having any cardiac issues. So,
Okay, thank you. It was a good flag on your part.
yeah, thank you. All right, so those are just the slides that are really too difficult to see. So here is where I start with cholesterol therapy, and this is it can be adjusted according to the patient. It is a tremendous amount of supplementation. A lot of the cholesterol products will put many of these nutrients together, but this is the general theory, general idea, and general recommendation that we want to hit when we're dealing with somebody with dyslipidemia. And we have quercetin, resveratrol, EGCG, lycopene, niacin, plant sterols, omega-3s, red yeast rice, alpha-lipoic acid, CoQ10, tocotrienols, berberine HCl, sesame, garlic, pantethine, and a probiotic. And I don't always use this entire regimen, but I definitely, my hit parade for cholesterol patients is niacin, 4 grams of omega-3s, red yeast rice, depending upon the rest of their liver function, because there is a lot of research saying that red yeast rice behaves exactly like a statin drug and can cause some liver issues. CoQ10 for sure, berberine HCl for sure, and berberine will also address blood sugar issues. And as actually some of the research says that berberine is as effective, if not more effective, than metformin in reducing blood sugar. Garlic is a great blood thinner and probiotic just to ensure good gut bacteria and gut function. And then with my dyslipidemia,
You had indicated that there was you try to get as many of those nutrients into one supplement formula as possible.
a lot of the supplement companies already do it. Like Designs for Health has a great antioxidant full spectrum capsule, and omega-3s, of course, are omega-3s. CoQ10, the 200 is, I use Q-Evail from Designs for Health. I use a lot of Designs for Health products in my practice. Quercetin, the single nutrients, interestingly enough, and it's interesting, the theory behind this, they don't occur as single nutrients in nature. So a lot of the supplement companies are against making single nutrients because that's not how they are created or act in nature. Pure Encapsulations does a wonderful job of single nutrients. And one of the reasons that I've always used single nutrients is from my days in the oncology office, because with cancer patients, we would have to high dose certain nutrients, but if you did it as a blend, then they would get too much of something else. So single nutrients became critically important. It's also very difficult if you are high dosing or therapeutic dosing something to do it in a blend supplement, because you would have to take, upwards of 10, 12 capsules a day just to get to that one nutrient level. So while they may not occur that way in nature, I'm not afraid to high dose, off-label therapeutic dose nutrients. So just Pure Encapsulations is a great company for single nutrients. This is where I start with most of my patients, whether they be dyslipidemic patients, or I have blood work that shows liver congestion, stagnation. I remember years ago, Dr. Rakowski, who was a functional medicine practitioner, and he said, if you have a weight loss patient and you don't start them with a detox, you're basically committing malpractice, because fat cells store toxins. So for sure, if somebody's got blood work that shows a lot of liver congestion, digestive issues, dyslipidemia, blood sugar issues, I start them with a detox. And this is the detox that I use. Basically, we call it leans and greens. And what I tell the patients is it's like Control-Alt-Delete on the computer. It's literally hitting the reset button. All food should be organic and fresh. A medical food, 2 scoops twice per day in cold water, and suggested support products. Of course, the support products will be targeted to each individual patient. Lean, organic, free-range protein, chicken, turkey, fish, lamb, bison, no beef, shellfish, pork, veal, lunch or deli meats, unlimited amount of organic vegetables, and my minimum requirement is 6 to 9 cups a day during the detox. There's no quantity restriction on the detox. If you're hungry, please eat. Drink half your body weight in ounces of water.
Let's
Go ahead.
Georgette, again, for the detox, and can you go back that slide just once, please?
Sure.
Yeah, there you go. Medical food. That's where I was going.
Okay.
There's a lot of different medical foods for different reasons. You're going with detox here, so I'm assuming for people that don't know medical food. So let's explain medical food for one thing.
Okay, so to be called a medical food, the product has to have passed certain criteria, and that would be trial with humans, efficacy it does what it says it does, and there is no medicine in the medical food. They are targeted nutrients for targeted problems. So in a cleanse shake, there will be a lot of liver, digestive, and gallbladder support with antioxidants. In a cardio-metabolic shake, there will be targeted nutrients for cardio-metabolic patients. In autoimmune and inflammatory conditions, I'll use Metagenics, Ultra Inflammex, targeted nutrients again for inflammation in the body, mostly relating to GI dysfunction. So they are allowed to be called a medical food if they have shown that they do what they say they're supposed to do, and they have been tested in human trials.
Thank you. Great explanation. And typically it's a powder, correct?
Correct. It's a shake mix. It's a protein shake mix. Rarely will it be soy-based. Rarely will it be whey-based. Generally, it is rice and pea protein-based, hydrolyzed pea protein and hydrolyzed rice protein. And all the companies make them, and they are labeled like one of my favorite ones, and you'll see this in one of the protocols as we get to it, is OptiCleanse GHI by Zymogen. It happens to be a really nice, effective detox shake. I'll use Metagenics Ultra Clear Renew. I use Designs for Health. They have, for my vegetarians or vegans, they have a VegaCleanse that I use. They also make a Paleo Cleanse. Numedica makes something called Total Vegan, which has GI and hepatic support, and it's chia and flax and rice and pea protein and some cranberry in it. So there's a lot of choices out on the market.
Thank you.
I think Zymogen and Metagenics are the only two that actually put on the label a medical food. So the protein we went through, unlimited amount of organic vegetables, no quantity restriction. Whoops. And then during the 2-week detox, they are going to have 2 shakes per day with the allowed proteins at 2 meals per day with a maximum of 6 ounces per day. I really am trying to get them to focus on eating plants, the most nutrient-dense foods there are on the planet, and with vitamins and minerals, et cetera, et cetera. And you all know that because you just learned it. And so these are all of the allowed vegetables. They can prepare the vegetables any way they want, raw, steamed, sauteed, juiced, or roasted. You'll notice, I don't know if you did, but you'll notice on here that I've left nightshade vegetables off of the allowed vegetable list. And that is because I don't know if a patient has a sensitivity to it or not. There could be inflammation, there could be arthritis, there could be some other inflammatory conditions, and it is, I believe, prudent practice to eliminate nightshades when doing a detox. These are the excluded things. The reason we take mushrooms out is because of the high mold content. As healthy as they are, they do have a high mold content. And then the very high sugar, starchy vegetables are eliminated. Foods that clean the liver. I did have, oh, actually, we were going to pull this up as a Word document. Hold on, because the print is so small. So this is, I use this really post-detox and give it to my clients so that they can focus on getting in some of the more nutrient-dense, liver-supportive foods, and we'll get to that. But this is kind of a general handout that I give to the patients. All right, then, and the reason that I chose the certain protocols that I chose for tonight, because obviously, you know, we could be on the phone for the next week going over a gazillion things, was I tried to pick what is sort of at epidemic proportions in today's world with most of the clients that we see. We know that diabetes is at epidemic proportions. We know that metabolic syndrome, syndrome X, cardio-metabolic, whatever label you want to give it, is at epidemic proportions, and that heart attacks are still #1 killer in this country. So this is my diabetes protocol, and these are the recommended supplements that I use: magnesium, chromium, iodine. But iodine, you must check the person's iodine levels first. Generally, oh, a typo, 12.5 milligram dose is sufficient. And the product that I use is iodoral. Zinc, 15 milligrams a day, berberine, alpha lipoic acid, vanadium, quercetin, and their Metagenics has a medical food called ultra glucose control. And I have been using it since it came on the market, which I guess is, I don't know, maybe 5 years. It is unbelievable. It is as effective can be, and it's got all of the nutrients in it. And then the food plan that I use with the diabetics is a low carb, time restricted eating food plan. And these are the, oops, there we go. Optimal food choices. Again, all food should be organic, wild caught, grass fed. That kind of goes without saying in our line of work. Protein that's allowed are the game meats, chicken, turkey, duck, and eggs, providing a person doesn't have an egg sensitivity. Fish and shellfish, vegetables, and most of them, as you can see, are low glycemic vegetables, except for the last three, and they're in brackets, and I'll explain to you when we get to the menu outline why those are bracketed. The fruits that are allowed are extremely low glycemic fruits, and there is a quantity restriction. There is quantity restriction on pretty much everything except vegetables, but there is a minimum on the vegetables. You'll usually it says 2 cups next to vegetables, and when we get to the meal plan, you'll see why. Nuts and seeds and fats, beverages, and then foods to avoid. This always gets a big sigh of disappointment when we get to the foods to avoid. So here's my menu outline for dysglycemic diabetic, pre-diabetic patients. And it's a very low carb menu, and what I try to do is use time restricted eating, and the reason for that is glucose spikes 25 to 45 minutes after a meal. Digestion takes anywhere from 2 to 4 hours. If we are not giving our body a chance for glucose and insulin to normalize and digestion to thoroughly complete, and we're eating again, we never use up what we ate from the meal before. So my goal with these patients is that we're actually allowing blood sugar and insulin to correct, keeping the insulin response low by keeping the foods being eaten low carb, and allowing digestion to complete. And then the body might actually become a little bit thermogenic and turn on its own fat burning mechanism and use some of its fat for fuel. So breakfast, 2 to 4 ounces of protein. A serving of vegetable is 2 cups. No starch. A serving of fat is 2 tablespoons. And then try for 4 to 5 hours between the meals. Lunch, same thing, and we add in a fruit. Fruit is eaten as dessert with the meal. If needed, because I find where people have a big problem is, and this is just real world, day-to-day clinical experience, most people eat breakfast, let's say, between 7 and 8. Doing lunch between 12 and 1 is no problem. Very few people are eating dinner at 5 or 6 o'clock. Work days are longer, pick up children from school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so dinner isn't happening until 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And that's a really long stretch, especially for a diabetic patient. to go without sustenance. So I will allow them to have a snack of 1 to 2 ounces of nuts and seeds somewhere late afternoon, 3:30, 4 o'clock. That way they also don't walk in the house like a ravenous pig and eat everything in sight before they even eat their dinner. You'll notice on dinner, I've increased the portion of protein, and it says 1+ serving of vegetables. So they have to have their 2 cups of green vegetables, but the plus represents the starchy vegetables, and that is the sweet potato or butternut squash, acorn squash, something along those lines. And that would be a half of a sweet potato, half a cup of squash, something like that. And the same rules apply with water, half their body weight in ounces of water, and whatever support products we have decided to use. Back on the supplements, a couple of the things that are hit parade, no questions asked, are berberine, chromium, magnesium, alpha lipoic acid, and the ultra glucose control shake. And a lot of times what patients will do is use the ultra glucose control shake as a breakfast replacement. And so I have a little recipe that I give them, and it's to put in a cup of frozen organic chopped spinach, a quarter of an avocado, water, ice, and that way they're getting their vegetables, they're getting their healthy fat, they're getting their protein from the shake, and it can count as a meal substitute. All right. We've touched a little bit on metabolic syndrome. It is called the deadly quartet: elevated cholesterol, elevated blood pressure, elevated blood sugar, and increased waist to hip ratio. Having 3 of the 4 is considered metabolic syndrome. I have consistently over the years used the Institute for Functional Medicine's Cardio-metabolic food plan. Unless a client is really in an acute situation, and I would consider metabolic syndrome to be pretty acute, and willing, because remember, we have to kind of meet them where they are. So you can talk until you're blue in the face, and they're only going to do what they're able to do. Or what they're willing to do. So I've used the cardio-metabolic food plan with great success for years. And the reason I use it is it includes all food groups. When I'm going through the food plan with them, I will tell them that these categories, i.e. dairy, gluten-containing grains, would be my least favorite for them to eat, and that where I would like them to focus is on the protein, the vegetables, the healthy fats, with fruits and nuts and seeds as sort of treats throughout the program. So we do a BIA in the office on all our patients, bioimpedance analysis. It's a measurement of body fat, fat-free mass, intracellular, extracellular water. It also gives me a client's basal metabolic rate, and I will pick the calorie plan based on their basal metabolic rate with an activity factor filtered in if they exercise. And there are many different levels of the cardio-metabolic food plan. This one is the 1,200 to 1,400 calories a day. And you can see for yourself that even they have chosen to focus heavily on proteins and vegetables. On the next page are the vegetables, but 7 to 9 ounces of protein a day, 1 serving of legumes, 1 serving of dairy and dairy alternatives, 2 servings of nuts and seeds, 3 to 4 servings of fats and oils. The foods that are in blue, as it says on the sheet, are preferred therapeutic foods. So, of course, we always point that out and make that something for the clients to pay attention to. And then my little side note on this is that I always cross off the gluten-containing grain column and have them on gluten-free grains. And you can see it's 1 serving a day, and the serving size is very small. And there are only 2 that are actually preferred therapeutic foods, and that's oats and barley, but barley is in the gluten column. Vegetables, 5 to 7 servings a day. Starchy vegetables, 1 per day. Fruits, 2 per day. And then recommended beverages, spices, and condiments. So this is a winner, and has been a winner for me for many, many, many years. And it makes it easy for the client. They have a shopping list. They know exactly how much they're supposed to eat from each food category. Okay, so case study number 1, male, 55 years old, dyslipidemia on a statin, pre-diabetic. Doctor wanted him on metformin. I have my own theory on pre-diabetes. If you're pre-diabetic, basically you're diabetic. Hypertension, so he was on blood pressure medication, and it was uncontrolled hypertension, even on blood pressure medication. Seriously increased waist to hip ratio, and he is your textbook cardio-metabolic syndrome. He'd like to lose weight, get off of his meds, and reverse his health conditions. These were the medications that he was on. And one of the things of note here is he had been on pantoprazole for years because on an endoscopy, somebody saw Barrett's esophagus. Right then, I know he's not digesting his food. He's on an acid blocker. So he's not digesting his food very well, specifically the protein component of any of the foods that he's taking. So I know with this client, I have to give some kind of digestive support and hopefully get him off the pantoprazole. He was a little afraid. He was willing to go off of everything else. In fact, hopeful to get off of everything else, but did not want to run the risk of esophageal cancer, which Barrett's esophagus predisposes people for esophageal cancer. So we started with a 2-week lean and green detox. I added in 4 to 6 stalks of celery per day to help with the hypertension. His supplement regimen was Metabolic Synergy, which is a great product from Designs for Health. It's like a multivitamin with targeted nutrients for blood sugar. Increased his vitamin D from 2,000 IUs a day to 5,000 IUs a day. CoQ10 to combat the statin that he was on and improve cardiac function. 4 grams a day of omega-3s. And I used during the detox Ultrameal Cardio 360, a medical food specifically designed for cardio-metabolic patients, with I spelled cleanse wrong, OptiCleanse GHI, which is a great detoxification shake. So 1 scoop of each mixed 2 times a day. His supplements were magnesium. The recommended dose for hypertension by Mark Houston, Dr. Mark Houston, is 12 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. But you have to check all the other supplements, especially like the shake and some of the other Metabolic Synergy supplement for magnesium content. So, of course, we did that. Potassium, 1.5 grams per day, as recommended by Dr. Houston. I really like to have people obtain their potassium from food. And if they're eating enough vegetables, they're most likely getting enough potassium. Hawthorn berry extract, 250 milligrams in a tincture 3 times per day. If you look at the research on hawthorn berry, it is as effective, if not more effective, than most of the hypertension drugs on the market. Probiotic to help his GI tract, digestive enzyme with lunch and dinner, again, because of the pantoprazole, and to help improve his digestion. Plus, he was having some breakthrough heartburn. GI Revive, made by Designs for Health, in his shake, 7 different nutrients, all designed to repair and restore the GI tract. Berberine for blood sugar, and recommended that he use cinnamon in his coffee and tea. Here are his labs. First appointment from the doctor: blood sugar 110, A1C 6.2, ALT 28, cholesterol 159 on meds, LDL 85, triglycerides 161 on meds. And I don't know how much research you've all done on statin drugs, but most of them do not affect the triglyceride levels. They work on total cholesterol and LDL levels. HDL was pretty good. Blood pressure was 152 over 100 on meds, and his weight was 254.8, and this is not a very tall man. After 2 weeks, you can see the really nice drop that we had, but of special note are his triglycerides and his blood pressure. By the end of the 2nd week, he actually had to call his doctor and get off the blood pressure medication because his blood pressure was going so low that he was feeling faint at times. And then after 8 weeks, just 8 little weeks, he's off all of his meds. We have a normal fasting blood sugar, A1C, liver enzymes cut almost in half, cholesterol, beautiful ratios. HDL is up, LDL holding, triglycerides, again, down. And then blood pressure's holding in normal range. And of course, his weight in just 8 weeks is 22 pounds lost. So this guy was in it to win it, basically. And he was a very compliant patient. So post detox, what we did was we switched to the low carb.
Georgette?
Yeah.
Did his cholesterol go up?
It did, but actually, it's still in a really nice level. And because the other, in all this education over all these years, the one thing I've been told not really to focus on was total cholesterol, that it was more the breakdown and the fractionation of the cholesterol. So we knew we'd probably see a slight spike in his cholesterol when he was off the meds, but I was so happy that the LDL was holding where it was and that his triglycerides had been cut in more than half and his HDL had come up.
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. So there are some research out there today that says that under 160, your cholesterol is actually too low. And then there's a lot of research that the people with the lowest cholesterol have the highest rates of Alzheimer's and cancer. And so I wasn't worried about this at all because all of the other numbers were so beautiful. What I was looking at was that we were reducing inflammation.
Right.
Post-detox, we switched to the low-carb meal plan with time-restricted eating, stopped the OptiCleanse GHI. We increased his Ultrameal Cardio 360 to 2 scoops 1 time per day as a meal replacement. I added in Syndrome, some Power Greens, and turmeric because he was complaining. He actually worked out quite heavily, and he was had been complaining of some joint pain, but turmeric is just a good anti-inflammatory, sort of broad spectrum anti-inflammatory, but I know it's also very targeted for any arthritic type conditions. So I added that in. He graduated. He not left the practice, but he checks in with me now like every 6 months, and his labs are beautiful. He's maintaining his weight loss. In fact, he's lost a little bit more. His labs are holding beautifully, and he's living his life, but he's making better choices as he's living his life. And he stopped drinking. It was a big problem. They were very social people, and after the detox, he couldn't wait to have a glass of wine, and he had a glass of wine, and he said to me, I really don't enjoy it so much anymore. So he's definitely cut way down on the alcohol consumption and is doing great. All right, I do have another case study in here and a couple other things, but I wanted to make sure we get to some patterns. Some of the ones that are on here are pretty obvious, but some of the patterns I think that we need to look for in lab work. So diabetes, hyperglycemia, usually we'll see elevated glucose, A1C, cholesterol, and triglycerides, and not too much will be low. A diet high in refined carbohydrates, you'll see elevated LDL and low phosphorus and total white blood cell count. Digestive dysfunction and inflammation. If you do not have access to digestive testing or stool testing, you can use blood work to determine if a person is having digestive problems or has digestive inflammation. And what you'll see elevated is the MCV, MCH, globulin, BUN, and basophils. And then you'll see protein low, albumin low, phosphorus, hematocrit, and hemoglobin. Fatty liver, we'll see glucose, triglycerides, cholesterol, LDL high, and HDL and ALT low or high. Gout, uric acid elevation, cholesterol, and BUN with a low phosphorus. Hypochlorhydria, most of the stuff is related to blood in terms of the MCV, MCH, MCHC, CO2, globulin, and BUN being elevated. And you'll see low chloride, phosphorus, calcium, serum iron, alkaline phosphatase, total protein, and albumin. Intestinal parasites, again, if you can't do a stool test, you can use the blood to see, and nobody's ever going to get hurt by giving them a course of oil of oregano or olive leaf extract or wormwood or something like that. I'm sure most of us are running around with some kind of parasitic activity just because of all the exposure we have. So in blood, what you'll see is elevated eosinophils, basophils, monocytes, and if anybody's tested IgE. And then you can see low serum iron, hemoglobin, and hematocrit. Iodine deficiency, you'll see an elevated T3 and a low T3 uptake and a low T4. And then leaky gut, again, if you can't test, you can see an elevated uric acid and elevated alkaline phosphatase. With a B12 folate deficiency, elevated MCH, MCV, RDW, serum iron, and LDH. LDH is really, it's lactase dehydrogenase. That doesn't get tested a lot by general practitioners, so it's more a functional medicine marker that gets tested, and then you'll see low red blood cells, hematocrit, hemoglobin, white blood cells, neutrophils, and uric acid. Vitamin B6 deficiency, you'll see low AST, ALT, and GGTP, which are all liver enzymes. A need for vitamin C, elevated MCV, alkaline phosphatase, and fibrinogen, and then low albumin, MCH, MCHC, hemoglobin, hematocrit, red blood cells, serum iron. Autoimmune processes, this is something that not a lot of people are paying attention to, because we were taught for so long that high HDL is great. The higher, the better, the more protective it is. But HDL too high comes with its own set of problems, and there are two types of HDL, just like there are different types of LDL. And patterns and sizes. So high HDL and LDH with low triglycerides and low cholesterol can be indicative of autoimmune processes. And then arthritis, we'll see the ESR, the CRP, albumin, globulin, and platelets elevated and albumin low. Dehydration, red blood cells, hemoglobin, hematocrit, total protein, albumin, sodium, potassium, and BUN will be elevated. And then a low protein diet, because we have so many vegans and vegetarians, at least in our practice today. And I'll see low BUN, total protein, and BUN creatinine ratio. So those were just some of the typical patterns that I see a lot of. Okay, case study number 2, 47-year-old female, history of Hashimoto's, experiencing extreme fatigue, overweight, and as she put it, has lost her smile. And I love that, because it basically, what she was saying to me is, I've kind of lost my zest for life. And her start date was October 6th of 2017. She was weighing in at 203.8 with 50% body fat. Here are her labs. Cholesterol was 211, not horrid, but down to 195. Triglycerides went from 104 to 97. TSH was 3.34 on medication. And in the functional range, that's actually too high. And we got it down to 1.78. And then her weight was really pretty remarkable. 43 pounds, basically, in 6 months. She was pretty happy. We started with a low-carb autoimmune protocol with time-restricted eating, and I have a copy of the autoimmune protocol in here. Supplements were probiotic, D3 5000, omega-3s at 3 grams a day, digestive enzyme, and thyroid support. And I used a product called Thyrozyme by Apex Energetics, and it is a non-glandular, nutrient-specific thyroid product. So iodine, selenium, B vitamins, vitamin C, zinc, everything that one could possibly want to support the thyroid. She remained on her Synthroid. She was too afraid to go off. But at least we've got her thyroid running at a good level. And the autoimmune protocol, these are foods to include. So pretty much all the vegetables, all the roots, most of the healthy fats, meats, offal, fruit, spices, herbs, and some fermented foods and pantry items, very much like a paleo diet, minus, to begin with, nuts, seeds, and eggs, because of the difficulty in digesting nuts and seeds unless they're prepared properly, and the high allergy potential of eggs. And then autoimmune protocol, foods to avoid: all grains, bar none, gluten-free or not, beans and legumes, nuts and are avoided, seeds are avoided, all nightshades are avoided, all dairy and eggs from chicken, duck, or goose. We ask the patients to try to avoid NSAIDs, alcohol, and then optional restrictions, and that's really based on symptoms. If somebody got really bad bloating and gas, I might go with a low FODMAP type autoimmune protocol. And then I will have the patient do this for 4 weeks usually, and then move them to food adding in a very controlled way, the same way they recommend it with an elimination diet, which is 1 new food twice in 1 day, wait 72 hours, and then if that food is good, go on to another food. If that food's not good, we leave it out for about 3 months and go on to another food. Case study number 3, 60-year-old female, liver toxicity, came in with elevated AST and ALT, hypertension, brain fog, and hypothyroid. It turned out she was undiagnosed Hashimoto's. Nobody ever ran antibodies, her thyroid peroxidase antibodies. We began with a 2-week lean and green detox using OptiCleanse GHI. Advoclear. Advoclear is a product made by Metagenics. It's a tablet, and it is used to facilitate the detox process, but also it helps a lot of people with blunting detox symptoms, headache, fatigue, nausea, etc. After 2 weeks, we moved to low carb with time restricted eating. I referred her to a functional medicine MD for thyroid medication switch. The doctor actually changed her from Synthroid to Armour at her 3-month appointment. The client began intermittent fasting and she continues to do well. You can see she travels tremendously, and so a lot of social events. Cholesterol in 3 months, I don't know that she was always as compliant as I would have hoped or as she would have liked to be, but it is what it is. Again, cholesterol decrease, nice decrease in triglycerides, really nice increase in HDL, some weight loss, and as you can see, liver enzymes, which was really important, cut almost in half and on the AST, and about, what is that, a third down on the ALT. Some additional patterns to watch. Association between LDL and HDL is that as LDL increases, generally we'll see a decrease in HDL. The diagnosis from the doctors is usually atherosclerosis, dysinsulinism, coronary artery disease, or diabetes. Where we need to start to really pay attention and show some concern and maybe refer out to a functional medicine practitioner, or implore the patient to be as compliant as they possibly can be, is when you see LDL over 150, total cholesterol over 250 with an HDL under 50. This pattern is specifically associated with coronary artery disease, and what you want to address is the oxidized cholesterol through diet, antioxidants, and phenols. And I think I'm running a little bit over. Serum triglycerides, the optimal range is between 40 and 60% of total cholesterol. Where we need to pay close attention is when triglycerides are above 250, and a definite cause for concern is if the triglycerides are over 400 milligrams per deciliter. This is where you would want to refer out for a fractionated lipid panel. So we get particle number, particle size. And what you'll see with this kind of triglyceride is a patient is usually experiencing gout, has a very elevated glucose and a decreased HDL. Of course, what we can do is support with diet, glucose control, specifically berberine, essential fatty acids, digestive enzymes with some hydrochloric acid. And then just to kind of wrap things up, we do the best that we can, right? That is our goal every day. It is an ongoing learning process, this lab world. I still use reference books for certain things, especially with patterns. The mastering of this takes time. I don't know that anybody ever truly becomes a master. Make sure you do a thorough intake. It is just one tool in the toolbox when working with clients, and there is no one that isn't going to benefit from good nutrition, increasing vegetables, decreasing garbage, and I refer to my supplement reps for a lot on certain products, like tell me what you found to be really good for lowering LDL and things like that. So if you're using supplements and you have a relationship with your rep, great, pick their brains. If you don't, establish one. I would strongly encourage everybody to purchase some kind of interpreting blood chemistry book, and any labs that you get, even if the doctors just run a CBC and a CMP, you will be able to use them to better how you address their nutrition and supplementation. And that's all I got to say.
Well, I think there'll be a little bit more, Georgette, because there's my questions. But take a deep breath and have a sip of water, some tea there, and we'll get to it. But thank you for this very thorough review. And it really, really helps to be able to see the labs, to be able to talk about a person. And I'm really grateful for your thought process of how you put the pieces together and why. And giving us the slides with the patterns are going to be immensely helpful for people moving forward. So
Thank you.
Good. So starting on the questions, the first gentleman that you brought in, he wanted to be checked after 2 weeks. It's fast, to do a repeat testing of blood after 2 weeks, but certainly you demonstrated that he looked, his numbers looked different, but could he feel the difference?
Oh my God, yes. He said he felt so much better, and his weight loss was like 7 or 8 pounds. In 2 weeks, he was so happy about that.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked better.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he looked less bloated. He looked less red in the face.
Yeah.
And he said he was feeling at least 90% better.
It's so amazing.
Yes, it really is. 2 weeks.
90%. But and it's something to be able to see the inflammation drain out of somebody's face, when they come back.
Yes.
It's stunning,
And
really.
the thing I see a lot too is belly bloat.
Yes.
And I'm not talking about like a fat belly. I'm just talking about, we've all seen it, that bloated belly. And they come in 2 weeks later and you want to say, what'd you do with your belly?
Yes.
Where
we
did
used to call it the beer belly. You used to call it the beer belly, right?
Exactly. Yeah, and I love mostly men especially, right? Like they slam on their belly and they go, look at this. Look at this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm thinking to myself, it's hard to miss. I don't have to really look at it. It's hard to miss. And actually, he did have a kind of bloated belly, and it was way, way, way down. So, but yes, you're right, Paula. That's a perfect way to describe it, watching the inflammation just literally drain out of them.
No, it's a beautiful thing.
Yep.
So the first question here is about software and the name of this software. Are you using Dickon Weatherby's?
No, it's RJL system. No, I'm going to have to get back to you on that. The
Okay.
RJL is the BIA.
Okay.
It's
It's okay. You'll get to it.
yeah, I'll get back. I have to check in the office.
Okay. And then this one's on medical food. Do you use a medical food or that does not have rice in it? Pea protein or whey?
I never use whey. I shouldn't say never. Take that back. I don't use whey during a detox because it is dairy.
Yeah.
And one of the things that comes out of the diet during a detox is dairy. With a low carb, time restricted eating, if the patient is tolerant of dairy, then I will use whey. But I learned this a few years ago, and it was very interesting. There is a woman, and I forget her name. She strictly focuses on females with PCOS. She wrote a book. She came up with an insulin index, just like we have a glycemic index. And whey actually was at the top of the list for foods that spike insulin.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and I will tell you that with my diabetic patients that actually monitor their blood sugar, dairy is probably the single food that causes the biggest spike in blood sugar, obviously aside from sugar and pasta and things like that.
Kind of amazing though. Is that true for all forms of it, from no fat to full fat?
Yeah.
Amazing, really. From a full fat perspective, it's a little bit surprising, but
Yeah.
it's a very reactive food, so then not really.
Yes. So pea protein, Designs for Health makes a nice pea protein, but
the question is, do you use a medical food that does not have rice, pea protein, or whey?
No, they're all there. I don't use medical foods that have whey. In fact, I don't even think there's a medical food on the market that is whey based.
But you would use rice and pea protein.
Right, rice and pea protein. Even with a person on an autoimmune protocol that is not allowed to have grains, because hydrolyzing the rice is just basically pulling out the amino acids. It is not like eating a bowl of rice.
Okay, Lucy, there's the answer to your question. You've got that about the hydrolyzed rice. All right. The question about the alcohol. You said any alcohol with slow metabolism and damaged liver cells. Yep. And yet, alcohol has been researched that we see some benefits from it in terms of
resveratrol and red wine. Yeah, if you listen to, I don't know if any of you are familiar with or listen to Jill Carnahan. She's huge with Metagenics and the Institute for Functional Medicine, and brilliant practitioner. If you listen to her talk about alcohol, you would never have another drink again. The eat red grapes if you want resveratrol. take to me, I guess maybe I'm sort of prejudiced when it comes to alcohol. I don't drink. It was a conscious decision. I didn't like the way I felt when I drank. And so it was just something I never did. I had that one good drunk in college and hugged the porcelain god all night, and that was that for me. Wine is like hanging an IV bag of sugar. Whereas
I just had to let that drip in for a minute there.
exactly. But it is literally like hanging an IV bag of sugar water, whereas distilled alcohol, believe it or not, vodka, tequila, don't do to your blood sugar what wine will do to your blood sugar. So I have to believe that, and some of the research shows that the damaging effects outweigh the benefits.
Okay. Eat grapes.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk berberine for a minute. You recommended it handily throughout all of the protocols, I believe.
Yes.
And there's some strong research out here about using it long term and its effect on the liver. Not a positive effect on the liver using it long term. So are you aware of that, and are you cautious in any way with berberine?
I'm really not. I am aware of that, but whenever I see that, I always question what condition was the person in when they, the study, what were the study parameters? What was the dosage that they were using? What else was the person taking, doing, eating, drinking?
Yeah.
Most of the products, unless you're high dosing them, and when I high dose and it's a therapeutic dose, it is for a very short time, a month at most.
Okay.
And then we go down to on-label recommendations by the supplement manufacturers.
Okay. Well, it's a good question here. What would happen if a client can't afford all these supplements?
Then and trust me, I have many. I usually will use a shake because most of them have all the nutrients that the person will need. A targeted shake, like Ultra Glucose Control, OptiCleanse, Ultra Meal Cardio 360, Ultra Inflamex, some of the ones that have specific names where you don't even need to have a nutrition degree to understand what they're for. And so it is probably the most, and if it's really, money is really a problem, so instead of 2 shakes a day, we'll use 1 shake a day. That way 1 tub will last them for the whole 2-week detox. Or I'll use a scoop a day. But with a person like that, you can rest assured I'm going to be recommending anywhere from 9 to 12 cups of vegetables a day.
Right. Yeah, it was surprising with in the diabetic menu to have only 3 servings of vegetables a day recommended, and 14 ounces of protein, right?
But that serving was 2 cups, so we're talking about 6 cups of vegetables a day.
Yeah, I have that at breakfast. So
right. Right.
But it's it's more of a paleo style menu there with 14 ounces of protein loaded up. So I think your point was.
I go low dose. I usually go very low on the protein. I'll usually have them do 2, 2, and 4, unless it's a big man.
And back on that diabetic menu, why no butter? There was no butter on there.
Oh, did it? I use ghee.
Yeah, ghee, yes, but not butter.
Yeah.
Just wondering if that was intentional.
Again, the dairy thing.
Okay.
Not that butter behaves the same as cheese or milk or any of the other dairies, but this way I know I'm clear if anybody has any kind of a dairy sensitivity.
All right, good, thanks. How do you get an overall IgE reading? Aren't they specific antigens, and why does that relate to parasites?
The I have seen occasionally, if you look at some of the functional literature, it will say that they run a just a broad IgE, and I have seen it actually a couple of times with where it'll just show IgE, and it would be, I guess the downstream of that would be because it would create food sensitivities and food allergies, that means there's some kind of intestinal dysfunction going on, and it could be parasitic based, causing small intestine whatever dysfunction. And I'm trying to pull up the page actually in my little book here on the IgE.
Okay, you get that, and while you're looking at that, what test do you use to check iodine?
Oh,
I've got you doing too many things at once, Georgette.
Yeah, I mean, usually you have to go through Quest or LabCorp or
just a basic blood test.
Just a basic blood test, yeah. Where is my IgE thing? I might have to get back to you on that.
Okay. Yeah, and because the papers were making a lot of noise anyway, so stop it.
Okay. Sorry.
It's good to laugh at ourselves. That's all I can say. Would you be concerned with the triglyceride being too low? For example, lower than 50, lower than 30?
Yes.
I would.
Autoimmune.
And do you have a suggestion for software for functional medicine for just a CBC app?
I'm going to have to get you the name on the software. You can probably Google, but one of the ones that I use is, hang on, I have his name right here. It is, I don't know if they have software though. It's Balancing Body Chemistry with Nutrition, LLC is the company. And it's,
I know they have a course. I don't know if there's a software, but
yeah, I don't know
specific
either.
questions that you have to look up for, I'll send them to you after the webinar if you can't
Please
remember them now.
Yeah.
And we'll get back to everybody specifically. No worries.
Yeah.
So, Baba, we were talking about, you were talking about Jill Carnahan. Spell her last name, please.
It's CARNAHAN.
Thank you.
She's an MD. Got an amazing history, and got into functional medicine because of her personal cancer, mold toxicity. I mean, it just, the laundry list goes on and on and on and on.
How do you address dawn phenomenon? If blood sugar during the day stays in a normal range, is ultra glucose control something that might help with that, or is there no need to worry about it?
Well, I think you have to look at cortisol with the dawn dilemma, because obviously cortisol increases blood sugar, and cortisol is supposed to come up in the morning and go down throughout the day. And I find that a lot of the diabetics, when we first start, do have the dawn dilemma. And again, it goes back to, most of them have impaired digestion. They may not know it, but there's definitely a lot of research showing that there's small intestinal dysfunction, i.e. leaky gut. with diabetes, and the I I I use the ultra glucose control, and it's usually the first thing that they do in the morning.
Mhm.
Even if it's not breakfast, even if it's not a whole shake, I'll have them throw 1 scoop in some water and start their day like
Okay.
that.
Okay. Great. Thanks. I wanted to circle back around to taking ALA, alpha lipoic acid. I think you had it at a pretty high dose of
600
600
milligrams.
milligrams, a couple times a day, maybe.
Yeah.
Just to be aware that if you're working with somebody that has any suspicion of heavy metal,
Hmm.
that ALA is a strong detoxifier, and it can really mess up somebody that's doing heavy metal and pushing that out of their system. So heads
Right.
up, everybody, on that.
Yeah, and there are some, there's definitely some labs that can, not 100%, but can indicate heavy metal toxicity. I had one patient, and his on medication for cholesterol and blood pressure and whatever, and
Yeah.
completely unwilling, and walked in and said, this isn't for everybody. And of course I said, what do you mean nutrition isn't for everybody?
Mhm.
And but this is where your intake is so important. And I said to him, are you exposed to any kind of heavy metals? No, I'm not. We have a water filtration system on the house, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Big deal.
After much probing, he worked in a dry cleaner from the time he was 15 until the time he was 22.
Yeah.
Excuse me, chemical exposure galore. And we store it. Unfortunately, it sits in the fat cells, which is why detoxing is so critically important. And there are a lot of supplements on the market that help with, like Keela Clear from New Medica, and that help with chelating. And in that case, you might actually want to put the person on some fiber.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, I want to confirm here. You've used the term TRE throughout here, time restricted eating, and is that AKA intermittent fasting?
No,
Mhm.
it is a version of, it is sort of, I guess, the child of intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is really time restricted. You eat between a 6 and 8 hour window and don't eat between
Mhm.
14 to 16 hours a day. Time restricted eating is basically 3 meals a day with 4 to 5 hours in between. So it does, in effect, what intermittent fasting will do,
Mhm.
in that it allows the digestive tract to rest.
Mhm.
It allows blood sugar and insulin to regulate and normalize,
Mhm.
and it allows us to digest our food properly.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. We're going to circle back to dawn phenomenon here and come back to Marina's question, because she said it feels like dawn phenomenon may be a normal response to elevated cortisol in the morning, especially that during the day it stays in the norm. Is that wrong to assume?
No, I don't think it's wrong. I think it also depends on how the person starts their day. If your client is the person who opens their eyes and immediately is stressed about the day that lies ahead of them, they probably will have the dawn issue.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you have to take it patient by client by client by client.
Mhm.
For some people, that is a normal response, and it's okay as long as their blood sugar is regulating throughout the day. The most important thing, and this is where I get upset, is doctors do not check insulin
And refuse.
and refuse to check insulin. It is a $10 lab test
That insurance doesn't cover.
that insurance doesn't like to cover.
So it's $10.
It's $10. We are fortunate in that we're aligned with a lab. I will usually send my clients over to the lab to get an insulin level, because if their blood sugar is high in the morning, but their insulin levels are normal, I'm okay with that.
Mhm.
It's when their insulin isn't normal, too high, and I don't even agree with the functional range on insulin. It's 0 to 17, and in the medical world, it's 0 to 25. Well, I, I, if you're at 17, you're a really good fat storing machine.
Yeah, I'd say.
And, we used to, when I was with Dr. Rosenberg, he wanted his patients 4 and under for fasting insulin. And I don't know if you guys, I've used this explanation before, but insulin is really the controller. It controls how much cholesterol we produce, because insulin drives the enzyme HMG-CoA reductase enzyme, which is the enzyme that drives cholesterol production.
Mhm.
It is what drives, of course, the glucose into the cells, but it also drives fat storage, and it's an inflammatory hormone. And it also controls leptin and ghrelin.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what your client's insulin level is, to me, it's like shooting in the dark.
Okay. All right, thanks. We've got to wrap this up, but last
Yes.
question here. Synthroid and the client that wasn't comfortable going off of it. Have you ever had anybody successfully get off of their thyroid medication that has been on it for years?
Yes, many.
No.
It takes time, it takes patience, it takes perseverance. And there's a lot of products out there on the market that, because I've had the reverse too. I've had patients who have thyroid problems and don't want to go on thyroid medication.
Sure. Yeah.
So
different process. But yeah.
Exactly. But it can be done. It
Okay.
can be done.
All right. Last question. Is there a functional range for fasting insulin?
Yeah, 0 to 17.
Thank you for that. All right, everybody. This was a good learning experience.
I hope so.
In my opinion. I'm grateful. I'm appreciative for everything that you put into this to explain it so carefully and thoroughly. So much appreciated. And we'll get back to you. There's 3 questions that we didn't get to on the names of the software and the IgG. We'll get back to you specifically and individually about this. But I want to let everybody know that we recorded this, and I think it's a good idea. There'll be some slides for sure to go back to and monitor and keep in your back pocket when you're looking at labs. You'll find that the recording under archived webinars in just a few days. And as usual, there's a survey to fill out after the webinar ends, and I appreciate when you take the time and answer a few questions and give us feedback about this presentation. And I want to let you know that our next webinar isn't until December. No, that's not true. It's November 20th with who are we doing this with? Anyway, meet me back here on November 20th, and we'll have something really good to review, I'm certain. Sorry, but we do have an All About Alumni tomorrow, Wednesday, November 7th at noon Pacific time, with our MSHN graduate, Amy White, and she's going to be talking about her post-graduation activities, and she's got a great presentation. I'm looking forward to it. So this concludes today's presentation. Thank you again, Georgette.
My pleasure.
I want to thank everybody for taking the time and listening to this and tuning in, and let's take this information and go forward with it and practice, because what we practice at, we get stronger at.
Yes.
All right, everybody, we'll be back here in a couple of weeks and tomorrow for All About Alumni. Take care.
Have a good night. Thank you.